So Lisa, Jewell, welcome to the Great Big Book Club. How are you?
I'm absolutely fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Congratulations on being number 4 this week.
Yes, thank you. Although things do move quickly in the publishing world, and that was, yeah, I think this week I'm now number 10, but it's good. It's all good. The book sales are looking really healthy, so hooray.
That's brilliant. I mean, this is the paperback of the hardback that was released last year.
Yes, so in fact, the paperback came out in December. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy that I'm still in the top 10 this many weeks later, and it has got a lot to do with lockdown. I'm one of the few writers who's actually benefited from lockdown, in as much as the bookshops had loads of stock of my books before lockdown came in. So they just keep like opening boxes in the stock room and putting more of my books on bookshelves because they haven't got, there's so many books they're not able to stock because of distribution issues. So I've been very lucky.
So the book is The Family Upstairs, which is a fantastic, dark, mysterious thriller, which has your lead protagonist is Libby Jones, who is at the age of 25 suddenly discovers that she's inherited a house. So tell me a bit more about the
not just a house. I mean, yeah, so she was adopted when she was 10 months old, and she's always known that her birth parents are both dead, and she's always known that they've had something held in trust for her 25th birthday, and she's never known what it was, and she knows very little about these birth parents. So we first meet Libby Jones just after her 25th birthday, opening an envelope from a firm of solicitors and discovering that what they had put in trust for her was an 8-bedroom mansion in Chaney Walk in Chelsea, which is, for those who don't know, one of the finest streets in London, with the huge houses overlooking the Thames. So she's inherited a mansion, which, were it not such a dark book, could have been a really, really jolly, happy thing to happen to a 25-year-old girl who's selling kitchens for a living in a designer kitchen showroom. But it's one of my books, so it's not going to be quite that straightforward. She discovers shortly after inheriting this house that when she was found in the house as a 10-month-old baby by the police who'd been phoned anonymously, she was in a cot alone but well looked after. It seemed clear to the policeman that someone had only, she hadn't been left alone for very long, but downstairs in the kitchen on the floor were 3 slightly decomposing bodies dressed in black robes, 2 of whom were her birth parents. So clearly Libby inherits the house and a massive mystery to unfurl, and the mystery is, pretty dark.
It's very dark. It's gripping. It's brilliant. It's sort of one of those breathless books that you can't stop reading, and you can't put it down at all. But you've got 2 other points of view, haven't you? You've got 2 other narrators, Henry and Lucy. Yeah. Now, I read somewhere that the character for Lucy was the inspiration behind the whole book.
Oh yes, indeed. So if you were to read the book without knowing the genesis of the book, you might think that I'd had an idea of writing about a cult, because there's a very overriding cult aspect to the book. But actually, the character in the book, who is the sort of the darkest and most mysterious of the 3 characters, and for quite a lot of the book you don't know what she's doing there or what role she plays. She was the genesis, and she was based on a woman I saw when I was on holiday in the south of France in 2017 in Nice, and I saw this woman smuggling her children into a private members beach club shower block, and she looked harried, she looked thin, she looked anxious, she looked like she was running away from something. Like her life hadn't turned out as she'd imagined, and I could not get this woman out of my head. And I invented this whole backstory for her, including this house in Chelsea that I thought maybe she'd run away from this big house in Chelsea. So in fact, the whole story came about because I wanted to write about this woman who I'd seen literally for 5 seconds, fleetingly, on holiday in 2017. And so everything else was sort of built around her, even though she is the most nebulous of the characters in the plot.
So did you become a writer because you were just sort of nosy about other people's lives? Because that is a brilliant example of the writer's nosiness of sitting in a cafe, or I presume you're having a glass of wine, and your whole backstory of the fantasy going on in your head.
100%. Even going back 20 years to my first novel, Raos Party, that was absolutely based on my incredibly nosy desire to. I used to commute into work on the train in Battersea Park, and I would just look at the backs of the windows, the backs of the houses, and peer through the windows and try to imagine who was living in those houses. And yeah, so it was absolutely based on my own sense of nosiness and just wanting to know what everybody's thinking and what everybody's doing and what everybody's getting up to. Yes.
But in the family upstairs, Henry is another one of the trio of narrators, but he's a much more difficult prospect for someone of our age to be writing. I mean, he's a teen.
Yeah, and that's actually I got to the point. I'd already written Libby's first chapter, and then I'd written Lucy's first chapter, which I'd been dying to write for months because she was the one I wanted to write about. And then I realised I needed to have another voice of somebody who lived in the house at the time of the events that led to Libby being found by the police in her cot, and the events that led to Lucy running away. And I realised that I had 2 female voices. Libby is 25, Lucy is 39. And I thought, I need to shake things up a bit here. I need to mix it up a bit. I can't have another female voice. So I could write about a man who lived in the house. And then I just thought, actually, who sees everything? Who hears everything? Who's got the most insight into the world of grown-ups, or the most curiosity about the way grown-ups' minds work? And I thought, a child. And so that's where Henry just sort of dropped onto the page pretty much the minute I decided to write about a young boy instead of another adult. He dropped onto the page and just kind of evolved as I wrote him. I didn't have any clue what sort of boy he was going to be, but you read it, you know what sort of a boy he turns out to be. He's quite shady. He's quite hard to read. He's not black or white. He's everything in between. And yeah, and he kind of wrong foots the reader at every turn. You're just like, oh, Henry, he's so sweet. And then you're like, oh, but Henry, that was a bit weird. Yeah, and we stay with Henry up until his early 40s, and yeah, he was a brilliant character to write, because I didn't know what he was going to be like until he was like it. So yeah, he was fun.
So when you do these books, is there a huge amount of research? I mean, there was, this is all about cults and child abuse and things. How do you go about doing something so sort of detailed and beefy as that?
It's just all in my head. It's just all there. Some writers love the research aspect of their work, and they put aside time every year, right? These 2 months is my research time, and then I'll start writing on this date when I've got like loads of notepads full of information and I've read everything I need to read. I don't work like that. I just dive in, and anything I don't know before I start writing, I'll try and find out while I'm writing, generally on Google. But most of it's already there. And things like cults, I've watched enough documentaries. I've read enough books. I've seen enough newspaper articles about the strange things that people can do when they come under the power of other people, charismatic types who, for you and I, who are not in need of any voids in our lives being filled, who are not empty in that way, we can see these for the charlatans that they are. But I know that there is another type of person who can get completely hoodwinked by someone with that amount of charisma and that amount of, it's like a sleight of hand in a way, isn't it? They know exactly the thing to say and when to say it in order to get the person to comply with their wishes. So that was already there. And I just had to decide who was going to be my master manipulator, what his name was going to be, what he was going to look like, and how he was going to do it. So yeah, so it's just there. You know, if you're interested in life and you're interested in how people behave, and you watch enough documentaries and read enough strange newspaper articles, you don't need to do any research.
I completely agree. And tell me about the house, 16 Chaney Walk. I mean, Chaney Walk is one of the most beautiful streets in London. Did you find yourself just sort of stalking the house? Did you walk up and down the street? Did you, I mean, why that particular street?
Because that was the image that came into my mind when I was picturing Lucy as a child. I just saw her in the middle of the night running down the street in bare feet and a nightdress, and I saw the river, and I just saw these big houses, and I thought, oh, well, that's Chaney Walk, isn't it? And obviously other writers might well have, like, you know, I live in London, might well have hopped on the tube and thought, oh, I'll spend an afternoon walking around Chaney Walk and feeling the inspiration come to me and decide which house. But actually, because I like to just jump straight in and start writing, when it came to Libby meeting the house for the first time, when the solicitor takes her to meet her new house, I just had to kind of suddenly decide what, you know, there's loads of different types of houses on Chaney Walk. So I had to decide very quickly which one I wanted it to be. So I did a Google image search. And actually the one that I wrote about is number 6 Chaney Walk. I just changed the number. I don't know why I changed the number. But yes, so the image that I found was an image of number 6. And I just looked at the house on my screen and I thought that fits in with kind of what I'd been imagining. So that'll do. So no, I did not spend any time wandering up and down Chaney Walk because, yeah, I never give myself time for these things.
How do you plot these books? So, because I'm obviously a writer, same as you, but I am terrible at plot. There's nothing I find more difficult than plot. So do you have little cards? Do you work it all out in advance? Do you have the ending and work backwards? Or do you think you're sort of channeling some higher being? I mean, I don't understand how you manage to do it.
Let's say I'm channeling a higher being. But I must be. That's a really good way of putting it. I always think I'm just flailing around like, yeah, completely terrified and not knowing what on earth I'm doing. But yes, I'm channeling a higher being. I don't do any plotting at all. I have a very, very loose idea of what's going on as I'm writing it, and I tend to plot as I write. I write 1,000 words a day, which I think gives me the momentum. I don't know. So I finish writing after I've written 1,000 words, and that leaves me with a question I need to answer before I can start working the next day. So then I kind of, I don't think too much about my work when I'm not working. I'm pretty good at just, you know, shutting up shop and just getting on with my real life. But so I do most of the plotting as I'm writing, in the shower, and that's it really. Yeah, I don't do anything on paper or on screen. It just happens as I'm writing it.
So do you live most of the time in your head then? Are you sort of slightly like deaf when someone's talking to you? No,
not at all. This is what I'm saying. No, I do it. I open up my laptop when I get to work. I look at what I wrote the next day. I might have had some thoughts about it in the interim. But generally speaking, I haven't had any thoughts about it in the interim. I don't think about it at all. And then I've usually left myself a question that needs answering. I've usually dropped something in as I've got towards the end of my 1,000 words that I know I'm going to have to deal with, and that will kind of move things on a little. And I just have to just go for it and work it out, and just I don't overthink. In fact, I don't think at all. I just get the words down on the page, and then at some point, maybe 2/3 of the way into the book, I suddenly realised I've set up so much stuff that I'm now going to have to resolve and explain. So, for example, with the family upstairs, I'd set it all up. This big house, this family who get taken over by another family, and this very charismatic man called Hudson who turns them into a sort of cult. We know that this baby Libby was found in her cot alone. We know that someone was taking care of her, and it clearly wasn't the people who were dead in the kitchen, because they'd been dead for days. We know that there were other children living in the house, but we don't know what happened to them. They'd just completely disappeared. And it's 25 years later, and we still don't know what's happened to them, and neither did I. I mean, I know where they are, but I have no idea how they managed to get out the house that night. I don't know who killed those people in the kitchen, how they killed those people in the kitchen, why those people in the kitchen. I don't know how those children got out of the house. I don't know if they died in the house or if they're still alive somewhere. And I don't know where they've been for the last 25 years, or what they've been doing, or how they managed to stay under the radar. So I've set it all up, and then I just have to somehow, without overthinking, rewriting, going back over what I've done and changing anything, work with what I've got, because I have not got time to do anything else, and make it all fit together. So for example, one of the characters who disappears on the night that the three people die in the kitchen, I knew where she ended up, but I had no idea how she could have got there. And that was a real sticking point, actually. And I had quite a couple of days of actually not being able to write, which is very unusual for me. I normally just plow through. And I just thought, no, this isn't going to work. There's no way. There is no way she could have got from that place to that place. It doesn't work. Oh my God, what am I going to do? And then I just remembered a throwaway character that I'd written into like chapter 10, who he just passes across the screen briefly, and he's not important, and he doesn't really do anything to the plot. I suddenly realized that he was the key to everything. He was going to get her from place A to place B. And it was just like a little bit of magic, the higher being, you see. It was like a little bit of magic. It was like, oh my God, I wrote that character sort of 6 months ago without even giving him a second thought. And actually, he's now the key to everything. So that's how I write, just on a wing and a prayer.
You're clearly a plotting genius. I mean, you've had so many top 10 bestsellers. I mean, I don't know how you do it. Genuinely, I don't know how you do it. I would be totally lost in that process doing that. I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, amazing.
I think confidence has got a lot to do with it. I definitely found it much more hair-raising when I was writing like this when I was younger and earlier in my career. But now I'm halfway through my 19th book now, and now I know that it doesn't matter how scared I am or how lost I think I am or what a mess I think I've made of it. I always manage to fix it. I always manage to find my way through to the other side. And just knowing that, and knowing that that happens every single time, and I've never had to burn a book in the back garden on a bonfire because it was so bad. I think that's what it is. I now know that just keep doing what you're doing. Just, it might feel weird, it might feel wrong, it might feel really rubbish, but just keep doing it. So I think that's a lot to do with it.
And do you have any favourites? I mean, you've just said you're doing your 19th. I mean, do you have any? We all, none of us, we're not supposed to have favourite children, but I mean, we do. So do you have a favourite? Do you have a favourite book?
Because I've written across 3 genres since Raos Party. So I started off writing romantic comedies, and then that sort of segued slowly into these sort of family dramas. And then that segued again slowly into psychological thrillers. So I kind of got favourites in each little that I've written in. So my favourite of my romantic comedies was Vince and Joy, which is a bit like One Day, a bit of a sort of, couple who keep sort of just missing each other and meeting at the wrong time, and, they should be together. Then my favourite of my family dramas is The House We Grew Up In, which is a novel about a family who live in the Cotswolds in a picture, like literally a thatched cottage, chocolate box cottage. And something terrible happens one Easter Sunday, and the family falls apart, and the mother becomes a compulsive hoarder. So it's about hoarding and the impact that has on the family. And then from the thrillers, I don't know. I think I might have to say The Family Upstairs, because it was quite an ambitious book. It's quite a big book. I've not written books with scenes set abroad before, for example. And as you say, I've got this young boy, this 12-year-old boy who we meet at the beginning. So I was going into territory I'd not been in before and managed to pull it off. So yes, we'll say the family upstairs.
It's extraordinary. So your career started with Raos Party, which was such a massive hit. That must have been quite a shock because you were working as a PA, and a friend of yours said, "Get your act together, do some writing."
Yeah.
You were moaning at a party about
Yes,
wanting to be
she
a writer.
said if I had a dime for every, because she was a journalist like yourself, she said if I had a dime for every person I've ever met who told me they wanted to write a book, I'd have a lot of money. And I think she just wanted someone to actually finally do it. I think. I mean, she wasn't being, she was being positive and encouraging, but also, exasperated with all these wannabe writers she kept meeting. And so she made me we shook hands and made a gentleman's agreement that if I started writing a novel, that she would take me out for dinner to my favorite restaurant. So I wrote these 3 chapters and she took me out for dinner to my favorite restaurant, but then she also loved these 3 chapters and made me send them out to a load of agents. I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have done it without her encouragement. And then, I got lots and lots of rejection letters, which kind of didn't surprise me because the whole thing had been, a bit of fun, really. But then one of the agents got in touch and said that, she would like to work with me on it. And that was Raos Party, which, as you remember, back in 1999, was a massive bestseller, and a real, it was huge. And what a start to a career that I had never been expecting to have. As you say, I was a secretary at the beginning of all this, and hadn't ever really. I think I thought that women wrote books once they turned 50 and their kids left home. I thought that's when women wrote books. I didn't think women wrote books when they were 25. So if it was something I thought about doing, it certainly wasn't something I thought about doing then. And it certainly wasn't something I thought I would do and then become commercially successful with, which was a massive, massive shock. So the whole thing was like a fairy tale at the time. It was extraordinary. And to still be here now.
I know, that's what's so extraordinary, is that you've reinvented yourself so many times, and every single time that you've done that, it's worked. Because lots of writers reinvent themselves many times over, and quite often it doesn't work. And I mean, I don't know how you've managed to do it, whether it's the higher being again, clearly.
It's a higher being. I don't know I think it's just how slowly I did it. Because I never had a moment of thinking, I don't want to write this anymore. I never, like when I was writing romantic comedies, I never thought, no, that's it. Me and romantic comedies are done. I'm not interested in writing that sort of stuff anymore. I just found myself with each book focusing more and more on other aspects of the story and less on the relationship at the heart of it, until I found myself writing a book called The Truth About Melody Brown, where I suddenly realised it wasn't about the relationship at all. It wasn't. I suddenly thought, oh, this isn't actually a love story. This is, there's a man in it, but he's not the central focus of the story. So there was never a time, and then sort of moving into thrillers as well. That was just something that happened almost by accident. I think, I never set myself up to change. It just happened as I was writing. So maybe that's why. I don't know.
Do you read avidly in the genres that you're writing in at the time? So do you suddenly see, like Claire Mackintosh, for example? I love that. I'm going to have a look at that, and then look at the tricks they're doing. I mean, is that how you're growing as a writer each time?
I wouldn't say that. Again, with the compartmentalizing that I do between my writing and my real life, I'm the same with my reading and my writing. They don't tend to inform each other at all. I see reading very much as a treat. It's like watching TV. It's just something that I love doing. And I do read very, very heavily in my own genre. I love all my contemporaries there, But even when I was writing romantic comedies, I was reading more thrillers and darker stuff, then I didn't read that much in the way of romantic comedies. It's always been my preferred genre. So yeah, so no, I can read a Claire Mackintosh book and just get lost in it like any other reader and not think too much about how she's doing it or what she's doing, and just love it for what it is.
So you said you just write 1,000 words a day. Like,
Yeah.
was it Hemingway? He used to write 500 and then have a vodka or a whiskey or whatever he used to do. Or, no, Graham Greene, I think it was actually Graham Greene.
Yes, that sounds more likely.
Yeah, Graham Greene was sit down and do 500 words and then allow himself a vodka or whatever time of day that was. Are you religiously doing your 1,000 words in the morning? I mean, how many children have you got?
I have two. I have a 13 and a 16-year-old who would normally be at school during the day. And so therefore I would have the whole day to myself. And I have got into a habit of doing all my admin and jobs that need doing before lunch, having lunch, and then writing until they get back from school. So that's what I was doing before lockdown. At times in the writing process where I needed to be less distracted because I wasn't necessarily, the momentum hadn't built yet for me to be properly focused, I would go and take my laptop to the coffee shop over the road and write there. I'd have my lunch there and then start writing after lunch. Or at the kitchen. I can't do that at the moment, can I? So I'm back to the kitchen table. And I can't write at the kitchen table because that's when my 16-year-old has decided that she would like to do her studying, and she talks a lot, and people keep coming up to me all the time. Anybody in the house who needs some sort of distraction or has a problem or an issue, straight to mum. And I live in quite a big house with lots of rooms in it, but I don't actually have a study. You do. I can see yours. Lucky you. I don't actually have, and I deliberately don't have a study because I like working at the kitchen table or in coffee shops. So I thought, let's not waste a room on a study for me. I don't need it. And now I really, really would love to have a study. So what I've actually done is I've rented an office across the street. So at the moment, I'm getting making sure the girls have had their lunch, putting my laptop in a bag, crossing the road, and going and sitting in my little office across the street and writing there in the afternoon. So I've got back into my pre-lockdown routine, which is writing for 3 hours every afternoon.
So, and this is book 19?
Yes.
Gosh. And are you excited? How far into it are you?
I am, well, I'm halfway through. I've just cracked 100 pages. So I'm a quarter of the way through, and that feels amazing. I think once you've hit 100 pages, you kind of feel like you're going to get there. But I've also got another book coming out in August, which is the one that I finished in December. So that's coming out in the UK on August the 6th, and it's called Invisible Girl. And then the one I'm writing at the moment will come out next summer as well. So there you go. Never ending.
You're a machine. You're a machine.
Writing machine, yeah.
You do one a year? Is it one a year?
One a year. And I know a lot of writers who do a hell of a lot more than that. So I often feel like, like I'm working at half capacity and I could be doing so much more. And but yeah, that's my limit. One a year.
And so it's called Invisible Girl, the one coming out in August then?
Correct, yes.
Brilliant.
And that'll be out in hardback in August. And hopefully there'll be some bookshops open and distribution channels working, and everybody who wants to buy books will be able to go and buy books whenever they want. So fingers crossed that should be a normal publication.
I hope so. And then the 19th one is called, do you have a title yet?
I have a working title for it, so don't hold me to this because I never get to keep my working titles, although my editor does actually quite like the working title for this. It's called Dark Place.
Brilliant.
Which is the name of another big spooky abandoned house. I've done another one, yes.
You like a big house? You like a big house?
I do. I do like a big house, love a big house.
Lisa, thank you so much for talking to us, and huge congratulations again on the family upstairs. I mean, you knock it out of the park every time. It's really, really impressive. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, it's lovely. Thank you. I've really liked talking to you. It's been fun.
Thanks, my love.
In a pub next time.